Beatles Seth, hello.
Lauren, how are you?
I'm pretty excellent. What's going on?
Oh, same old thing.
I knew you'd be wearing a hat, so I thought, I should put me George hat on for Seth.
There we go. I've got my Seth hat on. You've got your George hat on.
I've got my George hat on. Yeah, I've had this since like 1975. It's like one of my favorites because it's a little bit like Abbey Road.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, how is your life?
It's great. Things are good. I'm busy. I've got plenty of work to do. And we just came back, I guess 2 weeks ago, although it seems like yesterday, from a 11 or 12-day trip to Norway, which was one of the greatest vacations I've ever had.
Wow. What brought you there?
The main impetus, believe it or not, is the paintings of Edvard Munch.
Beautiful.
I'm just I'm as obsessed with him as I am with George Harrison and Bob Dylan. But in art, Munch to me is like the measure of all things.
Wow. And is his work there, or is it everything he painted came from there? All the scenes that you wanted to go see in person?
Most of his work is there, and some of the scenery that we saw, and we were in Oslo for a week, and he painted uh, scenes that happened out in the street in Oslo. So we were in the exact place of some of the paintings, which is, pretty amazing. But there's a whole museum just called the Monk Museum.
Beautiful.
And so we did that. But then his paintings are also in the National Museum, at a university. And then even we we crossed the country because we did wanted to see the fjords. You don't go to Norway and not see the fjords. So we did a fjord trip. And then we wound up in Bergen, which is uh it's California to Oslo's New York City, if you will. And there was a whole bunch of Munch paintings there in a different museum. So,
Wow.
um, yeah, it was pretty spectacular, and it was just we lucked out like there was not a single raindrop the entire time we were there, which is everybody was telling us was very unusual. It can rain a lot there, and it apparently had up until like the day we arrived, and then we just had perfect weather, mid to upper 60s, which for me is ideal, maybe like just around 70.
Yeah.
And it was also really relaxing. Even with all that, we went to the opera in Oslo, which is not a thing we do a lot, but it's a beautiful new opera house. And we had the opportunity to go. It was right across the street from our hotel. So we did a
How
lot of
long were
things
you
like
there?
that, which were just kind of spur of the moment, uh, kinds of, well, we're here. Why don't we just do this? Or let's not do anything other than just amble and through parks and gardens and
Wow.
outdoor cafes. It was great. Every vacation I've ever taken after about 3 or 4 days, I'm like, even if I'm having a good time, I'm starting to think of home and going home and starting to count the days. The last day we were there, day 11, we were sitting at an outdoor cafe, and I said to my wife, I said, "You know what? I could just stay. I could keep doing this." Which is so, in and of itself, it's not because I loved the place so much, although I liked it a lot,
Yeah.
but it was because something about this vacation, I was so relaxed in a way that I wasn't thinking of work and all the stuff that, I had to do when I get back, or even if I was for a moment, it didn't cause me any anxiety, which is very unusual for me.
So it wasn't like a feeling like you'd love to live there.
No, no. Although, you know, having been there, having met people, having seen how the the infrastructure works, transportation, the food, the and getting a sense of what the social safety network is there.
Mm,
If I did have to choose a place, if
yeah.
I could no longer live in the United States, and if Canada was out, of course, this was, a visit in late May, early June. I don't know how I would feel about December and January, but you know what? Where I live here in the US, December and January, it's pretty dark and cold, and so, I suppose I could get used to it, and that would be an option, definitely.
That's so cool. How long were you guys there?
So I think 11 or 12 days,
Wow.
which is a long time.
And you'd never been there before.
No.
Where are some
Now
of
I
the
don't know what's left, I mean,
what places have you been to besides there?
oh, I haven't been to a lot of places, but I've been to Paris, London, Liverpool, uh, Copenhagen, um, Portugal, Azores, Israel, Italy.
Ooh.
I mean, I'm old, so, Mexico. So,
I'm old
oh,
too, but I haven't been to too many places.
okay. Well, this just
Time to go.
it sure is. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Do
So,
you get
yeah,
do you get writing inspiration from these trips?
a little bit. Yep, I
Or s
definitely did from this one.
in what way?
Well, I certainly want to write about Monk, and partly in a way to try to for myself to figure out what is my obsession with him. Why do his paintings speak to me
Mm,
in a way more powerfully and more viscerally and more directly?
mm,
It's like I've got a direct radio frequency, not for every painting, but
mhm,
for many of them, and for a few in particular, which I've seen over time. Maybe there was a big Munch exhibition 5 or 6 years ago in New York City where I saw a lot of these paintings,
mm.
and there are a few of them where I stand in front of them and I feel an electric charge,
That's awesome.
an emotional charge, and I weep,
Yeah,
and because, I mean,
they're
his
gorgeous.
paintings are very emotional. He himself said, he wasn't capturing, forget how it goes. He wasn't trying to capture a a view. He was trying to capture the memory of the emotion,
Oh my goodness, and you're feeling it directly.
and I feel it directly with a number of them.
Wow. Did you know his work before you decided to go on this trip, or when did you
Yes.
first discover his work?
Yes. I don't remember when it was that I first started.
Mm,
I mean, I know that a key was going to that Monk exhibition in New York City 5 years ago. That was when I discovered the power of his paintings, their emotional impact on me. That was the
mm,
first time. I mean, it was a huge exhibition, and probably what drew me then was just, maybe an interest that we may all, well, I shouldn't say all, but many of us have, even if it's as simple as wanting to see The Scream, which is, his best known painting, and
okay.
I and it is one of the ones that makes me break down every time I see it. But
Wow.
there's so much more beyond that.
Yeah.
Ones that people would not think of, which just
You
speak to
wanna
me. So I learned that, I think, at that exhibition, and that's what made me eventually want to go
Are
to
some
Norway to
landscapes, did you
see.
say?
I'm sorry.
That's what made you wanna go to Norway to see.
Yes, yes.
So great. Did you say that some were landscapes and just spaces, not just images of like that scream
Well, that is true.
person?
Some are. The ironic thing is that literally 3 days after we returned to Hudson, New York, where I live, an exhibition of Munch's landscapes opened up just a little over an hour from where I live in Williamstown, Massachusetts,
Fantastic.
at a museum called the Clark Art Institute, uh, which I haven't gotten to yet, but it's just a car ride away, and it's on my to-do list sometime very soon in the next week or two to fill in that. So we didn't see a lot of the landscapes because they're all sitting here right just a car ride away from me.
Wow.
And once I see those, then it will be a complete view of what do one interesting thing he did is his paintings were so personal that when he would sell one of the ones that really meant a huge amount to him, he would paint it again,
To
just
have it just
to
to have
have
that.
it for himself.
And did that
Because
one
he
sell
had
too?
all of these works, whether or not they were sold, uh, and they weren't exact copies, but they were pretty close.
That's
Sometimes
super
it's hard
cool.
to distinguish.
Yeah.
Um, Therefore, at the end of his life, he gave all of his work to the city of Oslo.
Wow.
So
That's where
that's why
he's
you
from?
can have all of this stuff on display. I mean, if it was all scattered in
Mm,
private hands, then we wouldn't be able to see it unless everybody was okay with giving it on loan. But that's never going to be the case with all of them.
that's true. I've always wondered how painters do that. I would really have a hard time if I worked on a song for hours and hours, writing, performing, playing all the parts, mixing, mastering, just enjoying being in it for that long and then having to give it away and never see it again, never hear it
Right.
again.
Yeah.
It's pretty wild. At
Right.
least now people can digitize and photograph and make prints and things like that. But still, it's like, to me, they're like little bouncing baby songs and they still belong to me. Like I still feel for them kind of thing.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Do you have, any favorites that you wanna share your screen and show?
Oh, you know, uh, I wouldn't. No, that would. I'm not sure if I have them on my screen.
Mhm.
Um, but for anybody who wants to look up one of my favorites, because it's a lesser known painting of his, but it's the
Mm.
one that really, it's one of the ones that just gets me every time. It's a painting called Ashes, as in like
Okay.
cigarette ashes, although that's not what it refers to. That's
Mhm.
just the name. It's actually a painting of two people uh, in an outdoor setting, and there's just something about that image and the image of the two people, a man and a woman, that just,
Mm.
like I say, uh, I
I
could
love it.
probably a psychoanalyst would have a field day with my obsession with that painting.
But I think the coolest thing about this life is finding what you love and what you're attracted to and what turns you on and makes your chakras spin and gives you goosebumps and wants to make you feel like creating. Like if I hear something that's uninspiring, a song I don't like, I feel like songwriting is one of the stupidest things in the world. And then when I hear a fantastic song or a beautiful arrangement or some really cool chords or a really cool guitar sound and cool riff, I think, "Oh my god, I wanna go play and I wanna write a song," you know? So, if that can happen with food and people and paintings and everything else that there is on this planet, I mean, that's a really good life, you know?
Yeah, yeah,
Taking the
and
time to find those
yes,
things.
and for me, it's the same thing. And my outlet is writing, basically,
Yeah,
and but movies,
movies,
uh,
definitely.
paintings, music. I mean, the main thing I've been writing about my whole life is music, um, but also all these other things too, books. Um, so yes, I mean, and I've been very fortunate, although it's been a choice, and you make everything is a balance or a sacrifice, or you pay the price, but for better or worse, and I'm not complaining. It's also writing happens to be the thing that I'm best at or the one thing that I'm good at. So, and writing about culture and all these different um, forms of expression
When
has
did you
become
discover
it's been my life's work. So,
when did you fall into it? When did you fall in love with
oh
words or
God,
no? When did
I mean, honestly, I wrote my first music review for my high school newspaper when I was 15 or 16 years old. And, you know,
did you know what you were doing?
apparently, I mean, at least
But I mean, like, did you know that you were kicking off a lifelong passion?
oh, that's interesting. Did I know that? Well, probably not for sure.
Mm,
I mean, although I had been for several years, grabbing and reading everything I could, but it was back when Rolling Stone magazine was actually a really great music magazine. They actually
yeah,
wrote about me, had, great writers, The Village Voice out of New York City.
right.
I was just absorbing all of this stuff. So it was by the time I was 15, I was ready to to try to do it on my own. And I guess I went into college thinking that, well, I'll probably be a lawyer. And I don't know why. I mean, I didn't have any great desire to be, but it seemed like that was the right thing for me. In hindsight, I can't imagine it. There are other things uh, that I may other directions I may have gone in, but it didn't take long for me to figure out that this is what I was best at. This is what, both came the easiest to me, but that's not to say that it's easy. It's just that it's a thing I'm most comfortable with
Mm,
and that I love doing and doesn't really feel like, well, maybe sometimes it feels like work, but mostly it just feels like, my passion and my thing that I do. And so it's not laborious in every sense of that word.
that's cool. Did you always feel attracted to language or etymology or,
I
you know
always felt attracted to writing and books and reading since I was a young kid. I mean, I learned to read a year before everybody else did. Like when it was playtime in kindergarten and everybody was out playing, the teacher knew that I was reading and she held me back and I started so that when I went into first grade, when they actually formally started teaching reading, I already knew it. Um, and it just continued. I give some credit to my parents because simply for the simple reason that in our split level house in the suburbs, the upstairs wall was floor to ceiling bookshelves filled with books. And that, it made a statement about the values of my family. Um, and there were writers in the past in my family, and I was always very aware of that. But I was always pulling books down, that I had no business reading because of my age, um, which is, a ridiculous thing, but literally, because I remember when I would go to the public library and, look up books and some well, I don't want to denigrate, but like, somebody who worked there would say, "Oh, this is really above you, beyond you. You should go in the children's room and read there." Meanwhile, like, I'm looking up translations of old Yiddish stories written by an ancestor of mine.
That's so
So,
great.
yeah.
Wow. Favorite authors?
Mm. Kafka, Dostoevsky, Richard Ford, contemporary American, Martin Amis, who just died a few weeks ago, British author, Zadie Smith, fantastic, Walter Benjamin or Benjamin, uh, who was early 20th century. Uh, that's a few.
Yeah. What about favorite movies?
Oh, easy,
Easy. I know, I have
easy.
lists.
The Godfather movies,
Yeah?
absolutely. A lot of movies that Al Pacino was making in the 1970s. All those great New York City
Mhm.
or noirish 70s movies.
Right.
There's one there's one movie which doesn't fit any of that, but it was called Missouri Breaks, and it was incredible because it was Marlon Brando and Jack Nicholson. It was kind of like a revisionist Western.
Oh, wow.
And this was when they had both, like this was coming off of The Godfather and coming off of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. So Brando and Nicholson were, at the top of their game. But the movie kind of like didn't make an impact. Very few people have even heard of it. Like,
Huh,
have you heard of it? Nothing
no.
against, I don't mean to, no, nobody's heard of it. But there was something about it I just loved, to the point that like there was a time in my life where I could watch the movie and say all the lines along with the movie. And
That's
the
fun.
soundtrack was incredible. But the soundtrack, you would never know to hear it, was actually composed by John Williams,
Oh,
but
wow.
it's nothing like
Nothing
a
like
John Williams music. It was actually Americana.
wow.
It was banjos and guitars and uh so
Nice.
anyway, yeah,
So
so
cool. So
those are my
cool.
favorite movies. Since then, I guess, I'm Not There by Todd Haynes, the Bob Dylan, loosely based on Bob Dylan movie with Kate Blanchett.
I'll have
It's
to check that out.
terrific. One of my top films.
Nice.
Hard Day's Night.
Can't even count how many times we've probably seen
Right.
that.
Hey, I got that painting, Ashes. Do you want to see it?
I do.
Here.
Was there ever a story about it? Did she I mean, they weren't cremating people in those days, were they? It wasn't that she was scattering ashes.
No, no, I don't know why it's called Ashes, other than I think it refers to the emotion. In particular, I think it refers to the emotion that these people, certainly the man, if not the woman, are feeling um, at the moment.
I don't even see the man.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
Yeah,
So when you're looking at it on the lower left,
right. Oh, yes,
you
okay,
got
now I see him.
you
He's
see he's
yes,
yeah, you don't see his face, and he's got his hand on his head.
just a little bit of his ear.
Right.
Okay. Wow.
Um, you know,
Oh my goodness.
yeah, there's a lot to say about this, and a lot to, there's a narrative perhaps. Initially, it was totally the emotion that grabbed me. Actually, the more I read about it, the more I thought, I'm not sure I need to know that, because it just speaks to me on just more of a
Yes.
elemental emotional level
1895.
than, you know, like I never thought that this was a post-coital scene, but apparently that's what scholars think it is.
Okay. What does that
Um,
mean?
in other words, these people have had sex very recently, is what scholars say this is portraying. And I can see why they're saying that, but
Hmm.
like I say, it spoke to me intensely with that before I ever had read that or thought that. I
Hmm.
don't think that
What as a word person then, what words come to mind to you, or is it really literally just physical feelings that you can't put into words?
it really is. I mean, it's the channeling of what I feel Edvard Munch was feeling when he made this painting. And then the more you get to know other of his work, there are similarities. There are um, in the dynamics of the relationship between the two people, or in the individual people. There are paintings which really just focus in on a woman that will look very similar to the woman in this painting, and likewise the man.
Hmm.
So here I just think the dynamic and the setting of it being right on the edge of what to me looks like the woods, a
Yeah, me too.
forest
Sure.
too. Some people have told me they don't see that. I don't seems kind of blatant to me. Um, but anyway, so yeah.
Cool. There it is. And I'm definitely familiar with the screen, but you can tell it's the same painter.
Yeah.
There's a
Yes.
style there.
And he's so unique, you can't place him solidly in any school.
Hmm.
He was really unto himself. I mean, they speak of him as an expressionist,
Hmm.
but he really doesn't. The expressionists were very influenced by him, and he did overlap with expressionism, but he
Hmm.
started before that. Early on, there was some attempts a little bit at impressionism, at pointillism, but he really created his own his own visual vocabulary
Mhm.
and grammar. Yeah, I'm using literary terms to describe what
I
he
like it
did.
though. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
That's cool. Well, there are some folks that say that we come to the planet in families, like soul families. We have friends we come with, we have people that we've been in other lives with together, and we come back together. Some people say the soul is so big that there are other factions of ourselves, perhaps living other lives in other dimensions, in that we're just a piece focused here. I think there's a lot of ways in which feelings and deep connection to other people's expressions and art and books and words and things that they have lived and felt just reach us. Like you say, you feel that electricity. I wish at the end there was some way somebody explained how it all worked, because I don't think we're ever going to know, but I feel deeply about those kinds of things with other people, and their work. So I know what we're saying, I think. It's fascinating really, and it's just something to enjoy, hopefully. I mean, if it was work that completely disrupted your life or destroyed your emotional, you wouldn't interfere with the basic rugged concept of your personality now. Like if it destroyed you in some way, it might be
Mm,
something to steer clear of. But it's fascinating you. It seems like it's in a good way,
yeah.
influencing you or helping you maybe even access parts of yourself that
I think
are
that
are
in
they
particular,
new?
I
They're,
think that's very true. I
wow.
think it does for me. This whole deep dive I've done into Monk over the last 5 or 6 years has also been something of a self exploration,
Mm,
um, or if or just a feeling of, oh, okay, so here's somebody who was feeling a lot of the similar things that I feel,
wow.
have felt, still feel, and at least that's what I get out of it.
Nice. Yeah.
But
It's
that's
for
all that
you.
matters, right?
It's exactly all that matters. It's for you in that
Yeah.
way. And
And there are pieces of music that basically they're
yes,
either pieces of music or they're particular musical artists, for a great expanse that also
right.
speak, you know, on a level above and beyond what I like or, enjoy. But then there are some that just go directly to the
Hmm.
soul or the heart. The brain also.
When you hear songs, do you hear the lyrics first, being a word
No,
person, being an author? I don't either.
I don't. I I hear the very first thing I hear is the totality,
Mhm.
but nothing, nothing, in particular. Uh, I'm thinking because the first musical artist who I really got into was Bob Dylan.
First.
Wound up
Yes.
writing a book about him
Right.
eventually, and, you one might think, well, it's the lyrics, and yes, the lyrics are amazing, and he did something that nobody had done before, and he's continued to do
He's
that.
still doing it.
He's still doing it, 60 plus years later.
Yeah.
But when you first hear Like a Rolling Stone,
Mhm.
it's the whack of the snare and then
Mhm.
just the assault, and I use that word hesitantly because there's a lot of negative uh,
I know what you mean, though.
nuances to the word assault, but you just the urgency
Yeah.
of a
Just
song
grabbed your
like that.
attention. Yeah. The
And
sound
I
of the
find that with a lot of the music that really deeply gets to me, it has an urgency to it. I certainly felt that with the music of The Clash.
Okay.
Um, some of their best songs speak to me the most because they're just so urgent, so present, even when it's been 40 years,
Mm.
since they recorded the music. Um,
Well, like any
you know,
work, the energy and the intention and the emotion is embedded in the work. You can
and it
feel
transcends time and the original impetus
yeah.
and whatever the artist may have or composer or lyricist may have consciously been intending, if anything, at the time. None of that matters,
Mm.
over the course of time, because artists are working so much. I'm sure you can speak to this on a while they're creating consciously, they're also all of that creativity is being fed by unconscious ideas, feelings, desires, emotions. Um,
Frame of reference, everything you've ever heard and listened to prior.
and I don't think the artist necessarily is aware of that
No,
when
and
they're
thankfully you don't have to
creating
be.
it.
Yeah,
No.
it comes through naturally, and I think that's why the song unfolds, even if you've written it yourself, years later, there's still messages in it for you. There's still, uh, feelings and things that you just look at and go, "Oh, does it mean that too? Wow, that's I can't believe it's telling me this today, even though I wrote it so long ago, I didn't know that was there," you know?
Right.
What about, favorite tools? Do you have favorite pens? Do you write with a computer? How has this evolved?
I actually do. I do
I love
have.
paper and fountain pens and smooth
Yeah,
gliding.
it's nothing fancy, but there's a particular Uniball pen that just feels right to me. It's nothing fancy. I get them by the box, and I think they're a
Mhm.
dozen for $12 or something, or $14.
Hold it up close. Which one is it?
So yeah, I have,
I
like
gotta
I
see if
said, I
I've
have
used this one
boxes of them
before.
here. Let's here.
I happen to like these Pilot V pens. They're very
Let's
nice
see.
gliding medium fountain pens on smooth paper that glide real well. Ah, yes, I have used those. And they're
Yeah, they're great, and it's a particular
fine point,
size
medium
nib
point.
that I like because you can choose different ones, and this is just the one.
Which is it that you like? The medium, the fine,
I
extra fine?
wish I could see.
Do they have a
Just
bold?
have a box of them here. And I write stuff all the time in journals and different kinds. I just pick up stuff. I'm trying to get this. Why can't I get these things? Oh, I know, because I have the blur on.
Yes, right,
So,
right.
I just these are different ones. I mean, I do like the Moleskin notebooks,
Yes,
are
yes, me
great,
too.
and
Right.
look term notebooks, but
Yes,
I
yes.
also find different ones all the time.
Yeah.
Public Supply, um,
Have you kept
especially when I
a journal
oh,
most
yeah.
most of your life?
Yeah, and I also,
How many
a lot
volumes are
of
you up to? I'm up to, like, 54 volumes.
yeah, I haven't been that organized about it. This is just the normal
Yep,
Marvel Mead composition book, and
yep,
those have probably been the ones that I've used the most. Got stacks of them with notes and journal stuff, and
yeah, book
uh,
ideas and
all that being said, when I'm writing articles or books or yeah, it's all on computer, and I mean, when I started out, it was all on typewriter.
typewriter, yeah,
I
sure.
mean, I don't think of myself as that old, but yeah, even when I started out professionally, with my first articles
Yeah,
when I was in my 20s, which would be in the, mid 1980s, it was still typewriter.
yeah. I was still in my 20s then too.
I think we're the same age, actually.
63, I'm 63.
Exactly.
There
Yeah.
you go.
Yeah.
Bingo. We're both young, we're
Um,
both old.
right, right. Yeah, we're at that funny part there where you feel young but
Well, where do you like to write? Can it be noisy? Do you prefer it to be quiet? Do you like it to be home? Do you like to be out at a cafe?
it's that's really interesting question. And I do like I've always had a home office of sorts or a desk or a nook or something.
A nook, I
So,
love that word, nook.
yeah, yeah.
My writing
Um,
nook.
but I write in bed sometimes. I like working in bed sometimes. I mean, I
Nice.
have, right now I'm sitting at my desk and I have a big iMac 24-inch screen. Used to have a
Mm,
27-inch screen, but they don't make them anymore.
got to fit lots of words on that big screen.
Yeah, lots of words. And when I'm working on a big project, multiple page of notes, page of actually what I'm writing. Um, but but as to the question of where else,
Yeah.
sometimes on a especially on trains, because I do from where I live to New York City is a little over 2 hour train trip, and not always, but often uh, I will write an entire article or Substack column or something in
Or a
the
blog
2 hour
post.
trip. Hmm?
Or maybe a blog post.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's what like my Substack sort of is like a blog post.
Oh, is it? That's what you call it, the Substack? That's nice.
Yeah, Substack is it's a publishing social media thing where,
Oh,
so
cool.
anybody can have a Substack, and they just make it very easy as a platform for you to turn your writing into they make it very easy to turn it into a ultimately both a web page and an email blast.
Huh. Gotta write
So
that
you
down.
should check that out at substack.com. And you
Okay.
should, if you go to substack.com/Rogovoy,
Okay.
you'll see and I've only been doing that for about, I think, a year or maybe two at the most.
So you're writing different things to go there versus what's on the blog on your webpage? Because I was just reading
Yes,
about the palette spinner.
I make, well, the Salad Spinner was a Substack. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Do
Whereas
you
in the past, I did, and I still have it, but I hardly ever use it. My own website, WordPress-based website.
right.
So that would have been where I would have published original writing that wasn't being published elsewhere, because I do
Right.
have regular outlets that I write for. Um, but
So
this Substack thing just makes it so efficient.
is it like a distribution thing? Like it's a
Yeah,
publishing forum
it's like
place?
it's like what Mailchimp or Constant contact,
Okay.
but in a much more it's really instead of marketing, which those things really are about,
Yeah.
which you could use, to send out
Right.
writing, and I used to.
Okay.
This is really geared towards writers writing. It's not about design so much, it's very
Mm.
simple.
Oh,
You can put images in it, and you're encouraged to, and there's always an image in I find something to
a little bit of a page layout.
just give it a little, visual appeal to it, as
Nice.
opposed to just, blank text.
And
So,
what about
yeah, I'm very excited about that, and, and it's a way to get a little revenue depending upon how you
really?
feel, the like, people like me, we have the choice of just sending it out for free or making, giving an option, if you like this and you feel like supporting it, here's a way to give $5 a month or $60 a year or
Oh,
something.
great.
So,
Yeah.
I send out to about 4,000 people who've over the years I've collected a,
Yep.
mailing list to, and, a few
Sweet.
hundred, few hundred click the box and send me a little money each time.
I
So,
love that. Yeah, I have a little
yeah,
tip jar on my webpage.
it's like that.
And some
Yeah.
people just go on and give me a tip, it's fun.
Yeah.
What about where do you, collect you said you have a big screen, but are you working in something like Scrivener to make the book happen?
I did use Scrivener for the first time for, the book I'm still working on, but almost finishing up in my George Harrison book. And, I was aware of it. I hadn't before, I started working on this project, and, I put out a query on Facebook to, does anybody use Scrivener? And I heard back from a writer friend who she talked about like how wonderful it was, and she gave me a little tutorial, and so I did utilize Scrivener, which, is really, was great for a book because it's kind of a built-in database. So all your notes go in there,
Yep.
and there's just it's both an organizing tool
Yes.
for it's really for book writing.
Yeah,
So,
I love
so
it.
I did use it for that, and it came in handy, and I guess I would probably use it again. I hadn't
Yeah.
thought about that, but,
I used it for my 2 guitar books. I have 2 little ebooks that Amazon will print if people want them printed, and
yeah,
yeah, it's a good great tool, absolutely.
yeah. But, I wrote 2 books before that just in Word documents, you know, and trying to keep things organized. And when I'm working on a project like, in some ways I can be organized, but in other
Mm,
ways I'm not. Like when you asked about,
yeah.
my journals and my notebooks. Unfortunately, one I'm a little disorganized about that because I'll just grab any journal that's nearby and start writing. And it's
Adding
like,
to it.
no, that's not the George Harrison notebook. Now you're gonna have to remember to go back and type that up or move it to here.
Yeah.
I've got my book journal where I take notes on what books I'm reading, but again, that could just wind up being written in my daily journal because that's the thing that's in front of me at the time.
Yeah. 2 questions then. How many books do you read a year, including listening to books? And getting back to writing on the train, obviously you
Mm.
write at home at your computer, but do you like it to be noisy, quiet? Do you have the TV on, the radio's on,
Right. Um,
cafe?
yeah, I've done some cafe writing, kind of like train writing, and that can be good. I don't do a lot of that. I mean, I guess I do if I'm traveling,
Mm,
but when I'm home, I've got so many spaces in the house that I'm used to.
mm,
Um, but it's probably something I should do more of simply because, like, why does riding on the train work so well? I think it's because, in a way, it's a time of focus because there's not really much else to do other than stare out the window. Now, sometimes staring out the window for 2 hours is totally the thing to do.
right.
because you need that downtime or just that free association brain time.
Mm,
Uh, but also I think there's something like, once I start writing something, th- you know, knowing that this trip is going to end in 2 hours, it kind of just starts flowing. And I think being in a cafe might do that too. As far as noise, um, I do, I rarely, at home it's very quiet. And I rarely, I mean, if I'm writing about music, then I'm going back and forth because I'm listening
mm,
to the music and then writing about it. But when I'm just writing, I
mhm.
rarely have music on, or if I do, it's very particular ambient music,
Instrumental.
you know, minimalism. I find Steve Reich, Philip Glass, a
Mm,
lot of Radiohead, especially their instrumental stuff, or even Radiohead is kind of ambient even when they sing. And it's very, to me, low volume background,
mm,
headphones that, noise canceling headphones, so I'm not being bothered by other stuff,
right.
but I'm even counteracting maybe stray noises. So I will do that.
Wow, yeah. I need it quiet for sure. I would never be writing out in cafes, I don't think, and, some of the places folks do. I have written lyrics on commuter trains, and, I've certainly written in hotel rooms being out on different tours and gigs and things, but, yeah, I like it quiet. That's
Yeah,
why it's finally nice to settle down and not be living in apartments or places where
mm,
you share walls with other people or floors, you know.
right,
I can
right.
play drums and play guitar and tap my foot and not have somebody. I remember in one apartment, somebody actually took a pole because I was tapping my
Mm.
foot while I was recording. And before I knew it, somebody was banging on the floor right under my foot. Scared the bejesus out of me.
Were they at least Did they at least do it in some kind of proper rhythm to what you were playing?
I don't know if they were hearing what I was playing. I might have had headphones on. They just didn't like the tap of my foot. And I'm not a stomper. But it was so alarming to feel something coming back under my foot. I was like, what's going
Mm,
on? But,
mm,
some Boston apartments, especially, there's just thin floors, thin walls, and
yeah,
not the place for creativity necessarily if everybody else's energy and ideas are loud and scattered through your day. I like
right,
keeping my own trains of thought and my own sound world that's in my head and things like that. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
I had asked two questions at once and I forgot the first one. You have to rewind this and hear what the first one was. But like how did that first article or first review turn into more reviews? You realized you enjoyed doing that and then you sought gigs to do that more? How did that turn into book writing?
Yeah, well,
Were you
so
approached by a publisher to write these books or
actually, I was approached by a literary agent, which
nice.
is which is great. It's very rare, doesn't happen. But I had been, I'd been a cultural journalist. I'd been primarily a rock critic for a number of years, writing for the Berkshire Eagle, the daily newspaper of Western Mass of the Berkshires.
Yeah.
And
James Taylor country.
exactly, who I've interviewed a bunch of times and
Nice.
hung out with at his house for a few hours for a big
His
magazine
house,
convention and
fantastic.
everything. Yeah.
I've hung out
But
with him
anyway,
many
so
times,
I had,
not at his
I'd been
house.
writing concert reviews, CD reviews, artist interviews for years, and this woman who lived part time in the Berkshires called me up, got my number, and said, "Hi, I'm so and so, and I've been reading your stuff, and curious, are you writing a book? Or are you thinking of it?" And I said, "I don't know. Am I?"
Did you know at that time that she was an agent?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay,
She
so that's a
said,
good
"I'm so and so. I'm a literary agent,
that's a
and
good
I'm
question.
wondering." Are
For
you
you to
writing a
ask back
book?
then.
So I said, I don't know, am I? You tell me.
That's
And
great.
so we worked together for a while to come up with an idea. And actually, because I had different ideas, this was early on, and I had never thought, because my first book was a book about klezmer music
I remember that,
called
yeah.
The Essential Klezmer. And for those who don't know, klezmer is it's an ethnic music which is uh, based on Eastern European Jewish wedding music and dance music and music for listening and reflection. And
Nice.
there's been a huge revival of that. Huge, I mean, relatively for a niche, for a niche
Yeah,
audience. There's been a revival of it today, so that it's very modern. Klezmer, it's got influences from rock and R&B and world music and hip hop and all kinds of different things. People who are very well versed in the traditional music are making it now speak to contemporary audiences. Anyway, so
super.
I got really into that music, and it never occurred to me that I would write a book about it. We were talking about other ideas, but just, we were spending time together, and I was talking about this music, and she said, you keep talking about this music. Why don't you write a book on this? So it was really her idea. And
Nice.
at first I said, nah, you know, I don't think so. It's not for me. And it really took me 6 months to one day, all of a sudden I'm like, you know what? Because nobody had written a book about it
Yeah,
yet. And then I thought, you know what? That could be a good idea. And I'd already written so many articles on it, interviewed so many of the major players, that I thought, you know what? I've actually, that is kind of, in a sense, what I've been working on without even knowing it.
I
So
love
that
the
became
stuff
my
like that.
first book. My second book was about Bob Dylan, who, is the musician artist who I've been into the longest and the deepest since I was probably 13 years old, 14 years old.
Wow.
And and Dylan as a topic is huge. But there was this one aspect that nobody had really focused on, that I knew a lot about, because
Hmm,
I knew this other thing, and that had to do with Jewish texts and Jewish scripture, the
mm,
Bible, the Talmud, Kabbalah,
mm.
um, and I found a lot of references. Well, what happened was, like, I knew Dylan up at, A to Z. I knew everything about Dylan and all his lyrics. Then what happened was, when I was in my mid to late 30s, I started getting really into studying Jewish texts as part of kind of a whole spiritual thing that I was going through at the time. Um, and so what happened was, so I'd be reading, a chapter or verse from the Bible, or, a piece of philosophy of mysticism, and images and actual phrases would jump out at me because I knew them from Bob Dylan songs.
Wow.
And I started collecting all these, and until I had enough. Are you hearing my dog bark?
Just a little.
Just a
Nope, no,
little?
not a
Okay.
problem.
Yeah. I may have to all
I
right, well, let's
understand.
see what she does. Anyway, so to pick up where I was left off, she just distracted me. Um
You were
so that
hearing
was obviously the idea for my next book, the Bob Dylan through a Jewish lens.
because you were hearing his phrases in his lyrics, those phrases that you were just exploring.
A- And I mean, there's certainly plenty of Christian imagery in a lot of his music.
Mm,
There's references to poetry and history and all kinds
mm,
of things. So this was not like, this is Bob Dylan, and it was not, this is what Dylan did, because I don't know. Like we talked earlier,
right.
artists don't necessarily even know themselves where they're getting their stuff from. I
Right.
just found this preponderance of correspondences,
Yeah.
that plus the little biographical information that is available about his Jewish family upbringing and throughout his adult life, his relations to the religion of his parents and ancestors,
Sure.
which, was extensive. So that was my second book. And again, my agent helped find a publisher for that. Um, so I think, does that answer whatever the question was anyway?
Yeah,
So I'm
that's
sure this
very
is
cool.
interesting on its own, or I hope it is.
Oh, it is, definitely,
That's
definitely.
how that's
That's
how
how
those things worked.
that's how that happened. What about sustaining yourself all these years? I mean, besides music, paintings, those are a lot of different things, all the books you read, all the authors, the places you go. What kind of things do you do to keep yourself inspired or keep yourself
Hmm.
writing? Or do you ever think like, gosh, should I have been doing something else with my life? You know,
Very rarely, because like I say,
you like
it's the
it.
thing I'm best at, thing I love. There's never been a shortage or a deficit of inspiration or things to write about it. Now, maybe on a
Mm,
certain day or in a certain week, if I'm,
mm,
in a funk of some sorts, or, maybe a year where I'm just having a bad year emotionally or something,
mm,
those things do happen. But, over the expanse of my adult life and my career as a writer, no, there's always so much to write about.
mm.
And now when you get to our age, it's like, you know, the clock is ticking and there's so much more to do.
I know.
And so you kind of buckle down and try to do more and more.
Get to
as as it's hard because I'm happy with, happy. I don't like using that word. I'm satisfied, content with, with where I am, what I've done. Um, I have 2 grown children, both in their 30s, and they're
Wow.
great, and they're both involved in creative pursuits. My son is a musician and my daughter's a dancer and choreographer.
Wow.
Um, so, that was a lot of my 30s and 40s was being a dad. And in fact, I was a
Absolutely.
stay-at-home dad homeschooling my kids for a long period of time.
Wow.
So, um, and their mother, who I was married to at the time, was very supportive of me staying home, being with the kids. Um, you know, I still was writing articles and stuff throughout all this time. You know, I w People say, "Well, it's so great that you've been able to make a living, right, doing what you love." And, it totally depends upon how you define making a living. I've had some good years and I've had a lot of lean years but I've always, I've been very fortunate in having partners who've been very supportive because they
Mhm.
believe in what I do or they like what I do.
Nice.
Um, so, so that's worked out.
Do you wait for a bolt of lightning, or do you work at writing something every day? Like a particular writing practice, or like, how
Right.
do you turn on the juices?
Yeah, it certainly it has varied over the years. It still varies day to day. As I
What
was kind of, started to say that, you get older and you like all these things you want to do. So I am still trying to be more disciplined about that. I
Mm,
actually have on my, recurring to-do list every day, you know, journal writing at 10:30.
mm.
Um,
Set
uh,
a time.
Set a specific time even.
Wow.
Do I always do it? No. And do I always do it at 10:30? No, but at least it's there to remind me,
Yeah.
and not that I need reminding, but I am trying to, in other words, I am trying to be always trying to be more disciplined, make it more of a practice,
Mm,
as also as life, as I have more time because my kids are all grown up and don't need me.
Yeah.
And, you know,
But when you turn that on, does that start getting you super excited? Does it feel like that electricity you were talking about from the painting? Because I remember when
sometimes,
I wrote my first song, I was like, I don't even know how this happened. I was 10
yeah,
years old and I felt like I had just burst into a whole other realm. Like I had gone through some kind of invisible curtain or something. And it felt like a whole new room to be in. And I just thought, this is the coolest thing ever. I wonder if I could ever do this again, you
yeah,
know? Did you ever
yeah.
experience anything like that? Does that happen to you when you get called by the muse?
Yes, sure.
What does it
You
feel like?
know,
How did that happen? Where were you? How old were you?
right. Well, I mean, it happens like
Right.
a lot, I
I know.
guess.
I know, it happens every time. It
You
feels the
know,
same every time. I mean, you're playing with magic. That's a really cool thing, right?
I
There's, like,
do.
nothing on the paper, nothing on the computer, and then within an hour, there's, like, something's happening. It's like, where does that come from? It's so cool.
Right, right. And so with this Substack thing that I've been working on now for a year or so,
Mm,
um, where I am committed because people are paying me money. So,
okay.
once a week, I've promised to deliver an essay of some sort. So I
Sure.
have that to do. And yeah, when it's really like when I sit, and often I will just sit down, like you say, with a blank page,
Mm,
either on a train or
mm,
here at home at my desk. And I always have a running list of ideas, but often
mhm.
it's like, eh, none of them are speaking to me,
In
and
that moment.
I'll just start. I don't even know how I got that first line, or if
Mm.
I've really even decided what it's about. But at least half the time, it'll something will just happen.
So, like, free association or just start writing about anything and then see where it leads.
Yeah,
I
you
love that.
know,
Yeah,
some observation. Uh,
absolutely.
like last week, here's a perfect example.
Thank you, yeah.
My column, my essay for that I just sent out last week, the origins of it were I was in the kitchen and the salad spinner had
Yes.
been used, and it was just sitting there waiting to be cleaned. And I thought to myself, I don't mind doing dishes, and I actually find it kind of soothing and satisfying often
Mhm.
to wash pots and pans and stuff. We have a dishwasher, but cleaning the salad spinner is so does not give me any satisfaction because it's kind of impossible to clean, at least the way I would want to do it. So I had that idea and I thought, hmm, so I guess I sat down later that day or the next day, and something like that, I thought, I remember exactly. I wrote, I love salad. I hate salad spinners.
I remember. I just read it
Okay, so,
yesterday.
so those were the first two lines. And then I just continued
And you
to
were off.
explain
I know.
why I love salad and why I hate salad spinners. And
It's
I got a
great.
lot of feedback
Oh,
on that
sure.
when
You
I sent it
touched
out, like a ton.
so
So,
many of people
that's an
agree.
example of just like
Yeah.
inspiration from unexpected place.
I was agreeing with you too when I read it. I thought that's why I sometimes don't even bother to take it out because I don't wanna clean it. Oh, that's so funny. That is
Yeah.
perfect. I think sometimes that's what's so interesting is that a songwriter or a poet or a article writer, you can write about anything, and as long as it's part of the human experience and what isn't, you're in because everybody's experiencing similar things.
Yes.
So cool.
Yeah, yeah. And sometimes my I don't want to say serious and not serious, but some of the stuff that I write about may be can't think of adjectives that I want to place on these things because I mean, well, for lack of any better term, I'm sure I'll come up with one after we're all done talking about, but some things are maybe perceived to be more serious and some things may be perceived to be more casual or lighter.
Oh, sure.
Uh, and I
That's good
think,
though.
I mean, I think I have a developed a voice as a writer, or maybe 2 voices, I don't know. But really, I don't know that the voice is that different from the serious and the casual, because
Mm.
I'm not an academic. I don't do academic writing, never did, never desire to.
Mhm.
Um, you know, I like I like writing what I like reading.
Mhm.
I mean,
I like writing what I like hearing.
I want it to be smart. I want it to be provocative in some way.
Mhm.
I definitely want it to be entertaining,
Yeah.
and if it can be funny, if that suits,
Mhm.
then I certainly don't shy away from that.
That's awesome. Because I think if it connects with you, the creator, it's gonna definitely connect with somebody else. You know, it has to connect with you. And you don't even have to worry about, is it my voice? Am I writing from someone else's voice? What is my talent or whatever? It's like we all have our own fingerprints, heartbeat, thoughts, emotions, frame of reference. Anything you have to say is going to be you. And it's just a matter of like showing up. Like a lot of people don't have the confidence, or they won't put themselves out there. Like, how did you know? Did you get encouragement when you were younger to say, "Hey, keep doing this, Seth. This is pretty cool," or were
Well,
people against you?
no, no. I mean, certainly when I was younger, in school,
School
um,
liked it.
s- I always got great feedback on things that we had to write,
Yeah,
um, papers and stuff. And even in
sure.
college, I found that, let's say I didn't have a real mastery of the topic, or, if it was a blue book essay, which you have to do, in the next 2 hours, you sit in a room and write something.
Mm,
My comfort and ease with writing itself, that was never a block or a hindrance, which
cool.
I'm sure, for a lot of people, I know for a lot of people it is. So I have a leg up in that sense,
Yeah.
where the actual process of writing does not present me with any difficulty. I don't get blocked. I don't get
Yeah, me neither.
anxious, or or have trouble expressing myself. You
Mhm.
know, I mean, there may be moments when I do, but pretty much, once I'm either it's flowing, or if I'm writing, which I do, an article on a specific topic for publication somewhere that may, have been a topic suggested by an editor. Um, I just sit down and do it. I mean, I'm a pro,
You
you
keep
know,
going. Yeah.
I'm a professional at that, and I know how to do that. And the process of writing itself, that's never a question. It's the material, the information, how I'm going to relate it.
Mm.
Yes. But so yes, so to get back to your question, I always got good feedback. And I was saying, in college, even if I didn't really feel like I knew so much what it was, I could I could get by. I could get, like, an A instead of a B, or a B instead of a C,
Mm.
simply by virtue of my writing skills.
Yes.
That's not to say that it's bullshit. I think if I was writing bullshit, the teacher would have seen that
Oh,
and
absolutely.
said, "This is well written bullshit." I never got that feedback. What I got is I
And
got
would
a
you
lot
like
of
to publish it?
A's, you know? And so that was great feedback then. And then when I, kind of first started to launch myself in my 20s, um, as writing as a cultural journalist, really,
Mm.
um, you know, each article led to another one, and another one, and another one, and
That's so great. Now you said I'm
it's
a pro, and I loved the way you said that. You stepped right into it. There was no hesitation at all. What made you a pro?
that's a great question. What made me a pro? I mean, I think on a very basic level, it's really simple. It's that people paid me to write.
So you kept writing. It was practice.
and then they came back for more. And so I had these relationships with publications or editors over, different periods of time
Mhm.
where they relied on me and I gave them what they wanted. And it was always because it was something that I wanted to write about too. So I
Right.
had, for a long while, I don't know how long you've been in Boston, but in
Since
the
I'm 18.
okay, oh right. So um I wrote for the Boston Phoenix for a number of years. I had a great
Wow.
relationship with the music editor there. And I
Wow.
did, music, I did album reviews, but I did artist interviews. I was one of the first people to really write about Ani DeFranco, you
Nice.
know, early on. I interviewed her. I saw her. She had a gig at the Newport Folk Festival, and it was just amazing.
Nice.
Um, so yeah, so I've had so for a number of years I wrote for them. Like I said,
Mhm.
for 16 years I wrote for the Berkshire Eagle. There's
Mm.
this other paper I've been writing for over 30 years, um, and that is a newspaper called The Forward, which is an English language version of a venerable old Yiddish newspaper. But in 1990, somebody decided to launch an English language version. So it's at this point,
Nice.
it's a Jewish media outlet, um,
Cool.
which I've been writing for forever. And I'm a contributing editor on the masthead, and what that simply means is that I'm always writing for them.
Yes.
So
Awesome.
I've got a piece due this week, and I'll have another one, in a week or two, again.
Nice. Yes.
And that's a steady gig, like any
Yes.
gig. It could be like if you were a musician,
Oh,
well,
sure.
once a month or twice a month, I play at such and such a club,
Right.
you know.
But as far as your creative practice, you just kept showing up. You just kept following through. You just kept putting more words on the paper. You decided to take it to the finish line, like a lot of my students who are working with words, who are trying to come up with lyrics. It's very easy to hide behind a label. It's very easy to hide behind a term that you've heard people throw around, because if it's not happening, they think then they must be having writer's block, let's say. But I always say, well, are you having eater's block right now? Are you having sleeper's block? You know, are you
I
having
love
talker's
that.
block because I'm talking and you're not talking? Like it's like you
I
you
love
pick up
that.
you pick up the pen and do it. You sit down at your instrument and you play and you work at finding something, and they think, well, it doesn't come, or it's not coming right away. And it's like, what would come right away? You
Yeah.
have to explore, you have to be interested, you have to go digging, you have to be eager to look. And they don't have the stamina, it seems, to just follow through. They'll say, I could have come up with a million little ideas. And I say, well, you have to practice continuing. And then you have to practice finishing. And then you have to practice endings. So that's what I'm getting at. It's like the meat of the how. How did you do that as a young writer when you
Yeah.
probably didn't have to even be told how to do it, right? I never had to be told how to do it.
No, and I think, when people say stuff like, "Well, I have writer's block." I mean, I've never, one thing I did from the very beginning is I took my work seriously. Like I'm very often working on a deadline, and I don't like write to my editor the day before or the day of the deadline saying, "Sorry, I couldn't get it done because I have writer's block."
Yeah.
In fact, I was the opposite, and I was always and still am an incredibly reliable, "I will get it to you on deadline," you know? Um, and I do. And I deliver, if they say we
You
want
keep
1,000 words on such a topic, I don't give you 2,000, I don't give you 500. I give you, pretty much 1,000 on the mark
Yep. You
and
keep
by the
your
date
word.
that you want it.
You
And
have
and that
accountability.
that in and of itself, that's such a value that editors appreciate. And I've been an editor, so I know what it's like, to be on the other end and to have people not do that. But I've
Mm,
always prided myself on my ability to to meet my obligations and do what
there
I
you go.
said I would do.
Show up.
And
Yep.
so yeah. So that has, I think, stood me in good stead. I would not have this 30 plus year relationship with a forward if
Mhm.
I was unreliable.
Nope, not at all. And I can remember being a young kid being told, like, for the first time, you've got to write an essay, and hearing them read examples of essays, and my brain just picking up on the rhythm of the sentences, the rhythm, the cadence, the words, the bouncing syllables. And I thought, oh, I can do that. Because, like, I saw somehow I latched onto the form of it, and I thought all I have to do is fill it. It just seemed like an easy way in. And I always did well on my uh, word or writing kind of projects and things throughout all my schooling too. It was probably one of the only things that came up good on SAT scores and things like that. You know, it was just always the arts and language.
Right.
What other languages do you speak?
No, I'm actually very bad with spoken language. You know,
Yeah, I
I've
don't speak any others either.
I can't really I can't speak any other language.
Yeah.
You know, I in high school I did both French and Spanish, and in college I did French literature, in a class where it was taught in French, everything was reading in French, and the discussion was all in French. And honestly, I sat there for the semester understanding almost nothing anybody was saying, and you had to write the papers in French.
And
But
yet you
when it
stayed.
I stayed and I got an A because of the writing,
Ah.
you know, and I mean, I'm sure the grading had something to do with participation, and I tried,
Mhm.
but yeah, but I've always had a hard time with, I've never been immersed in a culture. It's not like I lived in France
Yeah,
for a year. I've never, I didn't do a year abroad. I did,
right.
I even lived in Israel for almost a year, and I went to Hebrew class and you know, learned a few phrases,
Mm,
but ultimately, everybody, right? I spoke English with, everybody knows English. It's like when I was in Norway, I
mm.
didn't need to know Norwegian. Everybody speaks English.
Oh, cool.
Um, so I mean, it's too bad because I've studied French, Spanish, Hebrew, Yiddish,
Mm,
and at least I know a little bit about them. I have some kind of
yeah.
very basic, minimal fluency with it, but
Yeah,
yeah,
you
I
you
don't have
probably
the
rem
ability to speak, or really if a native speaker spoke any of those languages to me,
mm.
I can make out a few words here and there, but not make sense of it.
So, maybe that paper then wasn't written in French, it was written in English?
No, it was written in French.
Nice.
And I don't remember if I like wrote it in English and then translated it
Mm.
myself.
But still you
I
did a
don't
good
know.
translation, I guess. They liked
Yeah,
it.
whatever. Yeah, it worked.
That's
And I
cool.
and I certainly didn't make a major of it, and one semester was enough.
What about
Years later,
hobbies?
I
Oh,
did become, casual friends with my French professor after I graduated, and I did kind of confess to her I never understood a thing anybody was saying, and I did a lot of the reading in translation, because we were supposed to be reading great, and she told me, "Oh, yes, everybody does that,
everybody does that.
even in grad school,"
Yeah.
you know?
Now they're gonna do it with AI. So I thought you were gonna say she retroactively changed your grade. What about hobbies? Do you have other things to take your brain into new places and new territories? Because I was
You
just
know,
thinking, I need a hobby. I should do something else besides. I don't know what it's going to be. But someone said, "Well, you're doing a podcast." I said, "No, I'm just talking to my friends online." And then I realized, oh, I guess it's turning into a podcast. Maybe this is partially the hobby.
right. So, I guess in a way, I stopped doing it a long time ago, but I think the hobby I had throughout most of my life
Hmm,
was actually playing guitar and singing.
nice.
Um, I mean, there's an obvious relation there, but not necessarily. Not everybody who writes about music is necessarily a musician. And I never called myself a musician, but you
Right.
know, I I I did my fair share of open mic nights and and Dylan tribute concerts.
That's awesome.
Um, so making music in some sense uh, is a hobby over the arc of my life. Although, and my wife always complains that she wants me to do more of it, and
Oh, that's
um,
great.
so maybe I should do more of it. But otherwise, you know, watching movies, watching smart TV shows, and
Yes, I was gonna ask you about the reading. How many
reading
books
more
do you
than
read a
anything.
year?
Oh,
Do
right,
you
you did ask me
Audible?
that.
Do you
Yeah,
listen to
I don't
Audible books?
listen to books. I can't. You know, I I can't listen to like selected shorts on the radio. I can't follow. I have to read. I
Okay.
can't. I can't hear people reading stories. I can't follow it for
Mm,
whatever reason. But so what do I? How many books do I read?
yeah. I have
On
friends who read
average,
hundreds of
a
books a year.
book a week.
Wow. Yeah.
Um, when I'm doing a project that requires a lot of reading, it could be more, or I could or that time may eat up into the hobby reading, the reading I do for love and passion as opposed to for work.
Right,
But
right.
yeah, at least 50 books, a book a week.
That's
And
amazing.
I often have 3 or 4 going at one time.
Oh, sure. I have that for sure, but not necessarily anywhere near that amount. I have a friend who reads almost 170 books a year. She teaches, she writes, she musics, she does everything. It's just like I don't know when she does all this. I guess a lot of them she's listening to too while she's cooking or driving to a gig or whatever too. What about Wordle and the crosswords and some of those fantastic
Yeah, I
a
haven't
lot of
done Wordle, but I did start a few years ago. I went back and I started. It was probably during the pandemic. I did, start doing crosswords, and I'm like, God, all these magazines have these great
yeah,
New York Magazine, the New Yorker,
the
the
times.
Atlantic, Harper's, and the New York Times.
Yep,
They've all. This is all free stuff, stuff that I'm paying for that I'm not making any use of, and it's fun. And being a writer and being a word person, I discovered that I can be pretty good at this. So it's very
absolutely.
satisfying and
Yeah,
relaxing,
there's so many words.
So yeah, crosswords I do in more recent years have become a thing, a
Somehow
hobby.
I remember hearing Paul say that his family, someone in his family started the big crossword in England in one of those publications out there. His family was involved with that. I'll have to look that back up, but that was interesting that
You mean created?
yeah, like they were like responsible for creating the big crossword out there.
When you say Paul, do you mean Paul McCartney?
That's what I said, yeah. Someone in his family is related to something starting that out there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think his tie-in was like, he has a love of words as well. You know, when he put paraventure in his English tea song, he was just thrilled. That's pretty cool. But
Right.
yeah, I certainly wouldn't be able to do half of those crosswords and wordles and those things. I just don't have that vocabulary. And then some
Hmm.
of them are out there trying to trick you in some ways. Some of them are like putting in some of the most obscure words ever, and they would definitely I would not score well. But yeah, it's like I have a friend who writes every day, I got genius. I got genius.
Well,
Which
like I say, I don't do Wordle, but with the crosswords, the other thing is the more you do them, the better you get. It's like
right.
anything else. It's
Yeah.
like working out, which I've tried to do.
You know what you
You
could do?
know,
I started doing a plank about a year ago.
yeah,
You do the hover and you could barely do it for 3 seconds. Now I'm up to 2 minutes, 10 seconds.
that's great.
Yeah, and I feel stronger, that whole center of
Yeah,
gravity and core strength. But you're
yeah,
right, the more you would see more language and more words, the more words I would learn, the more words I would be able to recognize next time.
and also, like, so for particular, like, for the New York Times versus New York Magazine, they have particular ways of doing things, and you get to know, so you get to, like, it's not just knowing the words, it's a process of understanding what they're doing with their clues,
Mm.
you know, because they can,
You catch on to their
they're
tricks.
they're tr I don't, tricks, but I don't mean that in a bad way, in a
Their
good way.
system,
They're
maybe
systems, they're
their way of
clever.
thinking. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
They might
and you
have to
do
switch up who's creating them because they're not gonna be able to stump you after a while.
well, the tip is to, start with the Monday crosswords, because those are the easiest ones. They get harder during the week, with the New York
Oh,
Times
really?
at least.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah,
That's
until
funny.
Sunday comes, and then that's like, the hardest one of all.
Then you have to be a genius.
Yeah.
This is so cool. What didn't we get to that you would love people to know about words or about writing or about, like, do you ever get to do talks about the creative process to teach or to encourage younger writers to.
Very rarely. I have done it there, a few times, but not in any regular way.
Mm.
Um, and that's too bad, because I've been doing it for a long time, and
Do it now. Do it now. Give us some tips.
yeah. For writers, my number one tip is always, the first thing I say is read.
Read.
Read everything. Good stuff,
Yeah.
you know, because how else are you gonna know how to do it if you don't
It's the same with
practice it? And reading is the way you learn.
It's the same with guitar playing or any instrument or writing music or anything because we don't grow up under a rock. You'd never learn how to talk or read if nobody ever spoke to you. You might not even learn how to walk.
Mm,
It's like everything is learned and you've got to develop language and how to speak. I don't even know if the brain would develop without people trying to give you one word at a time to teach you a
mm,
language. And it's just fascinating. You've had children. You know what it's like. I had a baby sister. I'm 13 years older than her, but to watch her learn and watch her brain and then hear her very first sentence that she thought of herself, it was fascinating to me to watch somebody wake up, watch them come alive.
yeah.
So words came alive in you. Read, what else would you tell them?
Write every day. Just
Mm,
write, free write. Don't the first thing to do, especially if we're talking about young people or people who are starting out, um,
play with words.
exactly. So just don't worry about what you're writing.
Mm,
Just start writing. You don't have to show it to anybody,
mm-hmm.
and you can do it if you do it in a notebook, do it on your computer, erase it if you hate it, and but you got to keep doing it. It's
Mm,
like anything else,
yes. So
you
practice,
can't
practice, practice.
yeah, and you can't expect to suddenly, one day say, "Okay, I want to do this," and do it and be
Mm,
good at it. It doesn't work that way.
no.
You know, I mean,
Hours and
I
hours
was
and
really
hours.
into reading and writing from a very young age. So
Mm,
so by the time I was in, late high school, when I was editor of my high school paper, and by the time I got to college and basically, did very well on the basis of my writing skills,
mm,
as opposed to class discussion, which, you know, I'm not like right there with debating, and
yeah, me
and
neither.
I, I'm a little more considered and
Mm,
introverted, and so I need time to think about things. I mean, I could do it, but it's never going to come out good. So
yeah,
I don't feel the need to be heard. I feel the need, if I have something to say and express it, then that's what I want to do. And I'm best at that in writing as
yeah.
opposed to in talking. Although, I do a lot of talks, not the kinds that you
Mm,
were saying about the creative process. I talk about topics, and, talk about Bob Dylan and Leonard Cohen and Paul Simon and the
Mhm.
Beatles and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Klezmer music, Yiddish music.
And so you've got a George book coming out. Anything you wanna tell people about that?
Well, yeah. So I'm finishing up. I'm doing revisions on my book on George Harrison, which will be published by Oxford University Press sometime in the year 2024, next year. Hopefully earlier in the year, but the wheels of publishing grind very slowly, unless I guess you're, James Patterson or Colleen Hoover or something, and you crank it out and they want to put it out right away because they're going to make $1 million, millions of dollars, which I'm not going to do. And my books are not going to do. But getting back to my book, it's I think I in some ways it's a very personal book. It's my account. It's like we talked a lot about why I'm obsessed with Edvard Munch.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know that I'll ever write a book about that. Like if I get an essay or two out of it, that's fine. But with the George Harrison book, it really is in a lot of way. Why am I obsessed with George Harrison? Somewhat to the exclusion of a lot of other people, including his bandmates, all of whom I love and appreciate in different ways. But
Mm.
George, I think, is so fascinating and does things musically that are so interesting and unique and to the point that for years I was talking about it and writing things down and I had to write a book about it.
Mhm.
So that's and I did spend time talking to other people who had various degrees of fascination or expertise, including my interlocutor here, you. Um, so it's not only me. It's me with a select few people who either interacted with them. For example, I think my book will have some stuff about the Get Back sessions
Those were
from
marvelous.
Michael Lindsay Hogg,
They
who
were so
lives right
marvelous.
here and who I got to know and who I think said stuff to me that he never said to any other people,
Wow.
in particular about just what happened. Why did George get up and leave that day?
Yes, we all wanna know.
We all want to know, and I'm
People
not
sell a
saying
lot of
that.
books just 'cause of that, just answering
Yeah,
that question.
yeah. So Michael had some good insights because he had actually been
Yeah,
working with the Beatles for several years. A lot of people don't know
of
that he
course.
was making promotional videos
Right.
going back
Rain,
to the Rubber Soul.
66, yeah.
Yeah. Um, so yeah,
That's awesome. When did you first get fascinated with George?
I guess there were several different levels of fascination. I think thinking back to the early and mid 1970s, I think I really loved his solo work,
Mhm.
certainly more than the other three. Um, I think songs like, My Sweet Lord and Dark Horse in particular. Dark Horse is like a monk painting. There's just something about that song. And I write about it. So I
Nice.
don't want to give it all away. But but
Right.
but
I
anyway,
was just
w-
singing that this morning before I came online here with you.
it's so there was that. And then there were periods where I was not that much thinking about George, but then obviously when the Traveling Wilburys got together here, here's my man Bob Dylan, and here's George Harrison together, and it's like, how mind blowing is that alone? For to say nothing of Roy Orbison and Tom Petty and Jeff Lynne. Um,
I love Jeff
uh,
Lynne.
what?
I love Jeff Lynne too.
I know you do. I know you do. um, but honestly, it was sometime in the let me see, I guess in the early aughts. when they put out this here, this Beatles, because I've been talking about solo stuff. They put out this, how do I
I
get
got it,
this to
yeah.
focus? The,
I have that.
yeah, it's anyway, it's a complete set of all the Beatles albums on CD.
Right.
So I got that, and that's when I really started listening. Oh, 2009 actually, so it was a little later than I thought. 2009, 2010. I listened to it a lot and really got into, the Beatles in a way that I hadn't ever been, that. But what I mostly took out of it was, oh my God, George Harrison. He's all over the place. He's all, and certainly in the first half of the Beatles, but in many ways continuing on till the end,
Mhm.
and especially on Abbey Road. Um, you know, this is, I mean, it couldn't have been the Beatles without any four of them. Obviously,
Absolutely.
it was the unique quality of those four people together, where the whole was greater than the sum of its parts.
Mhm.
But I felt that George was not like he felt. He was, he and Ringo were the economy class Beatles, the secondary Beatles. That it was Lennon, I think that the average person out there thinks it's Lennon and McCartney, or just
Mm.
Lennon, or just
Mhm.
McCartney.
Right.
Um, but I just heard George. I heard the most obvious thing, his guitar playing. I
Mhm.
loved his songs that he wrote and sang. Love his voice, but it's more his musical vision as a whole, when and what he was contributing to songs he didn't write necessarily. Like, in many ways, he was a co-composer of a lot of those Lennon and McCartney songs
Oh, right.
in what he added to them.
Yes.
And they would turn to him and say, okay, or George Martin, the producer, would turn to him and say, we need an intro.
Mhm.
And George would come up with these incredible the hooks
That don't
and the
sound anything
riffs
like anything else on their albums. Yeah, brand
that
new
make
stuff.
the songs.
Absolutely, not the song without it. And he
Right.
came up with some important lyrics too. I mean, he came up with "All the lonely people, where do they all belong?" You know?
Exactly.
And nowadays, there's like 11 or 12 people getting songwriting credits because they came up with one word, and he should have gotten a lot of songwriting credits back then for the
Right.
contributions he made.
Yeah. Yeah.
The copyright lines, lots of things are changing, which is wild, but did you also flip out when the BBC recordings came out, the live radio show things they were doing?
Yeah.
Because George was really bold and stepping up and singing in those days too. He wasn't feeling self-conscious about it, and his playing was just amazing, and there they were live,
Right.
just knocking these things out of the park live the way any of their live shows were around that time. Those are really amazing.
They are, and I wanna bring back that word that I was talking about earlier, urgency.
Mm,
His
good word.
playing in the live stuff, and in the recording stuff, his
Mm,
lines, because as we've talked about ourselves, amongst ourselves,
yeah,
it's he wasn't jamming, he wasn't doing blues riffs. He was doing original music,
melody, yeah.
and, and it's so connective. It serves as either, I mean, there's so many metaphors to think of it. It could be the backbone, it could be the lattice work, it could be the web, it could be the spine,
Mm.
um, of their music. That's what I heard, to a huge extent, and surprising to me at the time when I started listening to that Beatles box set.
In fact, if you listen to Jeff Lynne's album Armchair Theater, you'll hear that same web. You'll hear George vocally and guitar wise all through those songs, and that album is just fantastic and so full of Georgisms that,
Mm,
again, make those songs really shine with Jeff. And then you listen to Jeff's next album when George wasn't on the planet, and there's something so seriously missing. As
mm,
much as I love Jeff, it was like, oh, I loved all those Georgisms on all those things.
mhm.
really exactly what you just described. I think you'd get a kick out of it.
I will go back and and give it another listen for sure.
You've heard Armchair Theater before?
Well, you have told me about it, and I
Oh, I
did go
have?
listen to it. Yes. Yeah.
That's funny.
I mean, I loved one of my favorite albums of the certainly of the early '70s, but of all time was Electric Light Orchestra. This is
Sure.
before they were ELO. El Dorado.
Yeah, the one with the shoes on the cover.
Yes,
It's right in the other room, the album.
I think
Too.
I think and I thought from the very beginning I loved that album.
Me too.
And I think he was, I mean, that was, he made no bones about it that he was trying to pick up where he thought the Beatles would be going.
Mhm.
And although that may not have been what made me like it back then, because I wasn't that into the Beatles in whatever 1972 or whatever
Hmm.
that whenever that came out. I just loved it on its own for
Mm.
its own you know unique qualities.
Cool.
Yeah,
Yeah. So much good stuff, so many great words. And I can't wait for your book.
yeah, well, be patient.
I will be patient. I've been patient, you know.
Yeah.
What about accents? Did you ever get into accents? Do a little Bob Dylan or a little George
I did an incredible Bob Dylan imitation,
when you were
uh,
singing?
when I was really doing more of that, to the
Yeah.
point that I actually had put together a Dylan tribute band, not to the extent that, of the Beatles and George tribute bands that you were doing, but that played locally, eh,
Nice.
or even now and then a little bit further than local for special events.
That's
Um,
fun.
and people would say, "You sound more like Dylan than he does," you know? I mean, I really absorbed I got
I
it.
love absorbing things like that. Yeah.
Yeah,
George
yeah,
was doing that with Smokey Robinson in some of his early solo records. You hear him singing really high, trying to do that beautiful voice. And
right.
then at the end, he was definitely doing Dylan. You hear Dylan all over Brainwashed?
Yeah,
All over
well,
that album? I mean, he's basically talking and just trying to get it out, and, he's
right,
definitely it's like, "Don't do Bob George, do George. I love George."
right, right, right.
And, yeah, he went through a few different vocal sounds. I think we all do, and Paul has a million colors, which are just so
Mhm.
fun, you know,
Yeah.
so different to be doing, like, uh who knows how long I've loved you? That's a whole different sound than "Why don't we do it in the road?" And one of those kind of things. And then his long and winding. Then he's trying to be Ray Charles, and he has all these colors that are just so much fun. It's just amazing. I've always liked the way Paul would write lyrics about different kinds of things that you wouldn't necessarily expect. Like, I wonder if you would agree with this. Like, in some ways, when writing teachers would tell you, show me, don't tell me. They never explained to me what it was. But then when I was a kid and I heard Paul say, slipping into stockings, stepping into shoes, dipping in the pocket of her raincoat, I thought, use more verbs.
Mm,
And that will show rather than tell. Would you
yeah.
agree with that?
Yes. That's a great nugget right there that you,
He well, he was doing it, and then he could write a song about anything, which was just so stunning, right? Even Helter Skelter is that crazy ride thing in Europe. Have you seen a picture of that? There's a thing called a Helter Skelter, and it's actually a ride that you climb up the steps inside, uh,
mm,
and then you come outside, and on like a sandbag, you slide around and come down.
right, I
And
have read about this. Oh,
so,
cool.
yeah, you go up this thing and then you just come down. So he says, when I get to the bottom, I go back to the top of the slide where I stop and I turn and I go for a ride and I get to the bottom and I see you again. And I just thought, that's the coolest thing.
Yeah.
So then, like you were just talking about the Get Back special that was just so magnificent. I thought, wow, they're doing all of this in January, as I've always known. What can I do as January is approaching now? The big January month is coming. I'll try to write as many songs in a month as I ever tried to do because I've never done anything like that. How many songs can I write in one whole month? And I thought, I
Mhm.
want to write a song that is visual like that. So I remembered a friend said, "Hey, you've never been on a ski lift. Why don't you come? We'll go up Mount Wachusett and we'll just go ride the ski lift." So I said, um, when the chair comes round, we'll set ourselves down and hope the turn doesn't catch us funny. We'll lift off the ground, grateful we found the perfect day so warm and sunny. Let me fly away with you. And I was reading all kinds of other excerpts of people working on songs about hang gliding or just doing anything with some of these little things that look like a lawnmower chair in the air. I forgot what they're called. These little hang glider things and sitting things that take them right off the ground and they're flying and stuff. And somebody had written that like, it's such a great feeling when your body lifts off the ground. And so I was just like lifting these sort of ideas and feelings and comments about it and finished this song. But it started with the Helter Skelter idea because I wanted to write something different than I normally write about. I found in my life most of my lyrics in my 20s and 30s were almost about emotion or feelings, and the chords generated emotions. And sometimes I felt like I was in between emotions. I was like in between feelings and singing about very nebulous things in a way. You know, it was like not a story song at all. So I've tried to write some story songs here and there and found that like free association and object writing, like you could be writing a whole bunch of crazy things. I was writing a song, trying to write a song about like a love song on Valentine's Day once, and I had written a whole bunch of words like an object, writing about a painting one of my brothers had done, and I started writing all these phrases in the gobbledygook, just quick, write down some quick ideas that were phrases about the painting, like layers of paint. Some of these pictures are framed, some of them are hanging in museums, perhaps, and they're spoken about. Some of them aren't spoken about. Pictures in frames, pictures in this, layers of paint, shades of many colors. I was just writing all these silly little phrases. But then when I was working on the love song, I was flipping back through my word book saying, where are some lyrics? Where are some lyrics? And I said, shades of many ways about you,
Mm.
framed, unspoken, brought to love. And the chorus was, I want to be, like he says, I want to be the boom in your heart, right? Like, no, he said, Paul said, my heart went boom when I crossed that room. I thought, how can I rephrase that? So then I said, I want to be the boom in your heart. I want to be the picture in your frame, and I just thought, okay, this is going somewhere now, But it
That's
was
great.
it was sparking off these other things saying, that's a good way to say it. How can I say it and make it mine? You know? You probably have enough of your own original things that you don't have to do that. But do you ever do like a bunch of free association to just like you say, get the pen moving?
I not so much now, but I did a lot of that, early on, and
Yeah, a lot of
I
things.
bet that helped me a lot.
Yeah. Well, I bet if you're doing lots of crossword puzzle stuff, you just have so much vocabulary and ways to express things that, yeah, and they're just flowing all the time since you're reading so much all the time. That's one of the
Yeah.
reasons if you're having trouble finding lyrics, hint, hint, nudge, nudge, know what I mean? Wink, wink. Anybody listening? That if you're playing with words, you find words. If you're playing with bass lines, you find a bass line. Sometimes if you're playing with drums or guitar, you'll find the parts that you're looking for. Sometimes you'll find another part while you're trying to play something else, another idea pops in your head, but you have to be like to steer the car, you have to be in motion, you know? So I think
Mhm.
that's why it's really cool when Natalie Goldberg and folks like that who write books about the creative process are always talking about keep your pen moving, you know?
Mm.
So do you keep your fingers typing, keep your pen moving, keep your
I don't know, I don't know if I do or not, but I definitely do get into a flow state,
yes.
um, not always, but most of the time, even for an article, an assigned article, which is about something which maybe not like as personal, I
Mm,
do, I do the research. I have all the notes. I'm ready to go. But then I got to like make a narrative that's
yes.
people are going to want to keep reading through.
Yeah, that has a
And
beginning, middle, and an end.
so when I'm writing in that flow state, which is fortunately for me very often, that's what happens
Mhm.
because what winds up on the page is a recapitulation of, what's happened in that moment, in that length of time of flow.
And then if you get interrupted from that, or do you set aside time where everybody knows to leave you alone, that there's not gonna be talking to Seth right now?
It definitely getting interrupted or having to stop for whatever reason is would be would be and is very frustrating at those moments.
Yes.
So
You'd be
there's not a
very
lot of people to to get to get in my way. My wife does like me work at home.
mm.
But she works,
She's in
or
her own thing.
she's doing her own thing. She's in her own
Yeah,
flow state. She doesn't want me to interrupt her any more than you know,
that's right.
probably I mean, my flow states, my that kind of dedicated writing may only be, an hour or 2 out of a day. Hers is a full work day. So
Mm.
it's either, the only people who could possibly interrupt me are her or my dog.
Yeah, my dogs interrupt me a lot. I don't know how I've
And
gotten
the
anything done.
dog's like, "Hey, it's time for you to come out back with me. We always do this at 1 o'clock.
I know,
It's
they've got little
it's 1:30.
wristwatches.
Let's go." Yeah.
Yes, yes.
So, why I didn't want to get a dog, but I love my dog. So.
Me too. Um, I know Jerry Seinfeld just gets up first thing in the morning. I think it's like early in the morning, the first 4 or 5 hours, nobody talks to him, nobody says anything, he goes straight to his office, and he just writes jokes
Mm,
every day. He just goes in
yeah.
there and writes, and I love that idea of like a writing habit, you know? It's like I noticed very early on when I was a kid, I had almost written one song every month for a whole year because I was listing them and stuff, and I thought, "What happened to these 2 months? That's an interesting thing. Why don't you write a song a month? Why don't you write 2 songs a month?" Like, there were little things that came up like that, and, a lot of folks don't think they can turn it on when they want to, but if you just wait for that burst of lightning, you get out of the habit, and it doesn't work. No pro works that way.
No, no.
You gotta warm it up, turn it on,
Right. Which is
get it
why
flowing.
deadlines are actually a good thing. So,
Exactly.
for the most part. There's different kinds of writing. So there is
Yes.
some that you just sit and wait and you can do when you're inspired. But you gotta always be doing something. You can't
Yeah.
like
Well, I think it has a lot to do with that retinal, what do they call it? The retinal activation system, the RAS in the brain, because the brain is picking up so many billions of pieces of information and it's filtering them out. It's not letting us know what it's thinking about with our uh, circulatory system or our digestive system. We don't know what's happening with the breathing. We're not aware of all these things. We're not aware of what the dog's doing behind us. So maybe, there's so many things going on, but as soon as you decide to focus on something, you start seeing it everywhere you go. It's like when you move apartments and you need boxes, and then everywhere you go, you just start seeing the perfect boxes and you bring them home and you move and you unpack. I remember walking down the street after that to go get some groceries, and I was like, there's a good box. There's a good box. It's like, you just unpacked. You're fine. You don't have to look for boxes anymore. It's like you've got to give your brain something to do. And especially when I was a younger person, I thought my brain will pretty much eat itself unless I give it something to do, because it
mm,
loves to figure out puzzles. It loves to figure out problems. It loves to solve things, and it wants to work on something. It wants to be involved with something. I need to be connected and doing something that matters to me. I can't just vegetate, but I love resting and napping. So that's been a thing since I was a kid too. It's okay. It's like, who was it that said, "Rest until you feel like playing, play until you feel like resting"? That's such a great, great quote. I just love setting my mind on, I've got to figure out how to hook up that piece of gear, or I've got to figure out this bass line, or today I'm going to come up with 3 endings for the last 3 songs I wrote. I don't want them to fade out. And as soon as you set your mind on it, your brain goes, okay, I'll look for that for you. And it finds it. So what you're paying attention to and what you're focusing on is everything. And most people don't know how to think or focus. That's why they don't read. and that's why they don't write, and they're wondering why they're not getting enough out of life. So there's something very fundamental to communication skills, understanding, writing skills, communication skills. What do you think, Seth?
Well, certainly about about the napping and resting,
Mhm.
as much as my work is intense when I'm, really into it,
Mm.
that's balanced by the need to nap,
Self-care.
to lie down, to have downtime, and those are 2 different things. I may
Yes,
need to nap and have downtime. Downtime
absolutely.
being awake, but that's very important time. And, it's I guess, if you're at a job 9 to 5, that's gonna be kinda hard, but, most artists or creative people, I don't know if most, but many are not, and so that's integral to my practice,
Mm.
is to have downtime. I
So that's
can't say it.
important for people to know. Yeah,
I don't know that I get it every day, but I certainly get it most days,
nice.
more days than not, and I certainly nap, and that's not wasted time because out of those times comes stuff I'm not even, like, consciously thinking about anything or dreaming about anything in particular,
Mhm.
but work is going on
Absolutely. That's a
so
cool thing
much.
about the brain.
That's when you were talking about that,
Yeah, you set your brain on a task
absolutely.
and it's doing that in the background, just like rendering something or finding something on the computer. It's still churning it out.
So I do find, for example, like I do have an article due today or tomorrow. It's not a clear deadline, but I need to get it done soon on a specific topic, which I've already done all the research, all the reading, all the, web research, watched a movie, which is kind of what I'm writing about. Um, that's all done. And, I haven't started actually writing the piece yet, but what I have done is I did all that work and I've and I've had the luxury of some time to pass. So when I do finally get down to writing it later today or tomorrow,
Mm,
I I'm very confident that it's going to just come out. It's there.
mhm.
I haven't sat with a blank page to start it yet, but when I do, it's going to be much further along than I'm consciously aware of.
You get used to that feeling. You almost feel it being born. You know it's coming. It's like it's on the tip of my tongue, or it's like I'm working on it. I'm gonna finish that thing today. Like
Mm.
it's like you get used to it like a feeling. There's a sensation or something. It's probably just experience, but it's phenomenal. It's a really cool thing to have that kind of confidence because you've done it before, you know,
Yeah. I like the other thing you said about it may have been when you were talking about the brain and the retinal
activation system or
that you talked about
reticular
ab
reticular activation system.
you talked about the need for doing something creative. I think that's what you were talking about. The
Well, I need to do something with my brain.
mm,
It's just wanting to do stuff, you know.
because so I very much relate to that too, that I can actually, you know, I do suffer from some depression and, real depression, like what I have is not directly related to events or specific things in your life. Oh, I'm depressed because
Right.
I have to take the car to the mechanic. That's not, although things like that can put you back in a depressed state.
Sure.
Why am I talking about this? Because,
Because of the brain and the brain state and wanting to do
yes.
something.
So it's kind of hard when I get into that state, a depressive state.
Mm.
The best cure is to write or
Mhm.
to read or to do stuff. Of course, depression it works totally against that. So it's not easy. I have written down, I have, 5 things to do when I'm depressed, take a walk, take a
Mhm.
shower, you
Mhm.
know, play music,
Mhm.
write. you know, that's about it probably. Um, when you're in that state, you don't want to do any of those things, even if you read the list, you
I know.
know, intellectually, well, it says right here I should do that, but it's like, I just want to lie in bed and mope.
Mhm.
And, but I so I think my point is that that need to be doing that brain work,
Mhm.
to be communicating, to be expressing, to do your passion thing. Yeah, it is essential to what a creative life is about. And if your life is fundamentally in some way being about creativity, then you have to do it.
It makes a ton of sense because if it isn't balanced out with the self-care that you were mentioning, you burn out, you know? Uh, the I make those lists too. I feel like I grew up in a place where it was very easy to watch people around me who didn't have control over their thoughts or their brain, and it becomes a habit to fall into melancholy states, depressed states. I used to think I was a very subdued, melancholy person, and then I realized it was just I had really bad role models. You know, that's where the Beatles came in because there was so much hope, so much urgency, so much life, so much excitement, so much options for how to think, how to live, what to wear, how to be, what to do. It was like they were showing me the way. They were socializing me in a sense. And I know exactly what you mean when you say you see this list of things and you don't feel like doing any of that, but you used the perfect word. You said state. You know, even Tony Robbins, I think, was probably one of the first people I heard say you have to change your state. And you can change it from the outside in or you can change it from the inside out. So, like that movie, What the Bleep Do We Know? We'll talk about change your thoughts. Or Dana Wilde has a fantastic podcast for entrepreneurs, and it's all about making money the fun way. You know, it's not about hard work necessarily because anything that feels hard and it's a drag and you have to do this makes an artist say, F you, I don't want to do it, you know?
Right,
And they just
right.
want to do what they want to do. But you can do things your own way. And that's usually the thing that makes things work and click because you're finally aligned. So the best work we can always do is the brain training first. Put yourself in the right state and the right expectation and alignment, and then do the work, then do the writing, then write the song, then finish the article, then meet the deadline, then go to your appointment. Like, don't go when you really don't feel like going, because that's when you get in a car accident, because you really
Mm,
don't feel like going. So if
right.
there's anything to law of attraction and there's anything, I mean, I've just seen these things play out again and again and again. It's like, how much more proof do I need? You know, it's like it matters what you think about and what you focus on because you keep getting more of it. And then when that momentum happens, it just takes you down instead of taking you up. It's a spiral, you know? So
Yeah.
you got to catch it early and it's tricky. Like sometimes, like you say, the bath doesn't work, taking a walk doesn't work, the food doesn't work. Sometimes just taking a nap is the best thing because it's like just
Mhm.
shut it down for a minute, reboot because everything's squirrely
Yeah.
up there and I don't feel right. And you just reboot and you feel better, when you reemerge because you took the time to. I think sensitive people like us as artists are also picking up on the internal things we're not supposed to be taking up on, right? Yet they say your digestive system is your second brain or the first
Yeah.
brain.
Yeah.
And so, you could be feeling a little indigestion and think you're totally depressed. And really your body's going, where's the brioche? And if you
Right.
don't know it's that, you think you're having a bad day and you can't write. And it's like, it's an interesting ride being down here in a body, it really is.
Mm.
Yeah.
I think self-knowledge is a great thing. And, why I think about that a fair amount is because it was only about 10 years ago that I was really introduced to the concept of introversion and what that really means and what it doesn't mean.
Tell me.
When somebody suggested that that might be me, and I started reading about it and learning about it. It explained so many things about my life up until that point.
Yes.
And it made it so obvious what to let go of and what and how to reorganize
Yes.
my life, because otherwise I was working for to a significant extent at cross purposes with myself.
Sure.
And no wonder I never really enjoyed large gatherings, parties, and stuff like that. It's
Right.
and no wonder that for a number of years I coped with that by drinking as a social lubricant, which of course, in the moment might feel good, but with any kind of perspective, it's the worst possible thing you can do
Yeah.
when you're that kind of person, you're faced with that, because it's a depressant and it just makes you
Absolutely.
more depressed. Um,
That's so
so
good you learned that.
with that knowledge, and I wish I had that knowledge when I was 25 and not have to learn it when I was already in my, around 50 or early 50s.
Mm.
Uh, you know, well, again, to some extent, I have no regrets because life's turned out okay.
Mhm.
You know, I'm happy. Again, that word. I'm satisfied with how things have turned out and where they're at and where they're going. But there was probably some unnecessary pain that I went through, and I probably caused pain where maybe I would not have had I known that. And
Mm.
now I've been introduced to a new, closely related, not the same thing, but I think maybe based on something you said, about this too, is is the concept of the highly sensitive person,
Mhm.
HSP, which is not synonymous with introversion. There could be or could not be a relationship. Not all HSPs, highly sensitive people, are introverts necessarily. An extrovert
Okay.
can actually be an HSP. Hard to imagine, but it's true.
Right.
Anyway, so I'm learning more about that, and all these things are explaining are helping me to understand, whether or not they're real or not. They certainly, on some level, give you a framework to understand. I guess this is how I started talking about self-knowledge and how to
Mhm.
understand yourself, and how liberating, how both important and how freeing and liberating um, this can be. I guess maybe people get it from therapy, psychotherapy. I don't
Mm.
know. Um, Maybe. Uh,
Hopefully.
yeah. Or
Hopefully they
however
get something
however
from
they
that.
get it from.
Yeah.
I mean, I
Well,
gained a lot through my spiritual studies. I gained a lot of
yeah.
life wisdom,
Right.
but it's great to like put it all together to some extent, and
Yeah.
if
There's
you
no
can.
yeah.
And I think George Harrison dealt with a lot of these things,
Yeah.
and and we can learn a lot about ourselves and about how to live through learning about how he dealt with himself and how to live. As you know very well, but as people watching this may not know, that, George Harrison's first real Beatles song that he wrote was called Don't Bother Me,
Yeah. From his hospital bed.
you know?
Or
And
sick bed anyway.
yeah, and
Yeah.
that's I
Says it
won't
all.
that says it almost all, really. And but the other thing that we have to learn from him, which he was brilliant at till the very end, as far as we know, what we know about him personally, is that he had this wonderful sense of humor
Mm.
and humility that was the equal of everything else that he had going for
Mm.
him. he didn't take himself that seriously. He was able to be awed by Bob Dylan,
Mm,
by Ravi Shankar,
mm,
by some spiritual people who he knew.
yeah,
Um, even though he was one of 4 of the most famous
yeah.
people in the world.
They were 4 so intelligent guys that, they were always looking for more, always curious, and that helps. That'll get you through life right there, just being hungry for more. I find a lot of things kind of boring, in systems and in structures and meetings and trying to get everybody on board, and the questions that are like prolonging it for 2 or 3 hours when I got it as soon as they sent the memo that there'd be a meeting about it. It's like, done, got it. Like, so yeah,
Well,
dipping into some patience.
we were talking, or I know you had kind of mentioned this in passing about people maybe not tapping into creativity, not necessarily even their own, but living an unconsidered life.
Mm,
I don't want to put anybody down. I don't want to be judgmental. Everybody's got
mm,
their own thing. I have the answers for myself. I don't have the answers for anybody else.
yeah.
I can share if you want to know. I can
Mm,
share what I've learned about myself, and maybe it'll speak to you. And we can have a conversation, and we relate to a lot of things, not everything, but a whole ton of things we do.
right.
Um, I do think that we're in a place and time where there's too much coming at people all at one time, too many different things. And it's hard to filter stuff out for a lot of people. And it's hard to focus because of that. And on the one hand, these are wonderful tools. It's great that any night I can listen to any music I want and watch any movie or TV show I want. You know, how wonderful is that? But, you can just spend an awful lot of time taking in with that without exerting any of your own, like I say, not even creativity necessarily. If you have it, great, but your own thoughts,
I know.
your own ability to think critically. And even that's kind of a lofty thing. Like
No, I know
by
what you mean.
think critically, I simply mean, have an opinion, have a take on.
Don't just eat everything they tell you to eat or buy or do or be,
Yeah,
do wake up and have a choice, have a desire of your own.
yeah, it's interesting.
Did you
Sometimes I think, I mean, religion is a funny thing because on the one hand, religions tend to give you stuff on a plate and you're sort of like supposed to buy into them. But on the other hand, I think we lose a lot because there's a lot of wisdom in religions that has been gathered over the hundreds and thousands of years. And I don't want to lose that. I don't think we should lose that necessarily. I mean,
no,
we don't have to become faceless, thoughtless believers in something and just surrender ourselves.
right.
I mean, maybe some people do. Maybe some people do need that, and maybe it's good for them. I kind of think for the majority of people, it's probably not good and potentially harmful to individuals and dangerous to society.
Yeah. But to take the best of everything that's ever been learned. Like the mistake I made was I always thought that each generation got smarter and smarter and things got better and better. I didn't realize that. I remember a friend of mine saying, not necessarily. And I just hadn't read enough about history or anything to know, and so it's always the best of times and the worst of times, and it's always been that way, and that's sad because the Beatles and everybody else that studied these kinds of things and philosophies were hoping that we could evolve and we could just get better and better, and that people would see the light or they'd want to turn on the light. Like when John said, "I can't wake up you, you have to wake up you," you know?
When you said, it's always the best of times and the worst of times,
Mm,
that's absolutely true. I would add to that, the more time passes, the more extremes those 2 things happen. So, in other words, yeah, we've made so many strides in medicine, say.
mm,
It's the best of times. A heart attack doesn't necessarily mean a death sentence. You could, live for years after having a heart attack now, whereas maybe, or infections, like infections were a death sentence. I once had an infection that could have killed me and would have killed me had we not had
absolutely.
antibiotics.
Sure.
So in that ways, in that and many other ways, it's the best of times, but
Right.
it's also in so many ways the worst of the worst of times.
Yeah.
You know, just the destruction of our planet being the most obvious example.
Yeah.
And then the incipient fascism,
Yeah.
both home and abroad.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah.
On a lighter note, have have you seen the film 52577?
No.
I just watched it twice recently. It's by Patrick Reed Johnson, and it's a story about a young creative person who wants to be a filmmaker. And it's just absolutely fascinating to me. I mean, it's up in one of my new top movies because I love Cinema Paradiso and Back to the Future and Pleasantville and The Truman Show and things like that. But it's right up there with those because it's so different, and yet it hits that thing that's the creator in me that was misunderstood at home and desires to have a life creating things. And at one point, he's actually talking to all of his school friends. Like, what do you want to do? What do you want to be? What do you want to make? Like, you don't want to just do this every Saturday night. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing with your time on this earth? And I just love that because he was connected to something that he had to go explore, and he made a life doing that and teaching, and he even makes a cameo in the film. So
Cool.
so cool. Um, Something else you said about that kind of thing was, I remember writing in a song of mine called "Looking Back" from the late '70s, early '80s. Maybe I wrote it. No, I wrote it in the '80s. Uh, there was a line that's talking about people so sure they lived more than the motions filling every day. You know, People
Mm.
just get up and they go through the motions and decades go by. But it's like you were saying, an observed life or a thoughtful life or a passionate life or a want to connect to another human being life. There's so much more to talk about and to be a part of. I thought the people around me understood that, but they didn't. That's why I'm having these conversations.
Yeah.
Wanting to reach out to other folks and say, "What was it like for you?"
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Amazing.
Right.
It wasn't until about the last half hour or so your mic goes in and out. I don't know why.
Oh,
But
uh, I wonder if I'm actually. I thought I was talking through my
you
microphone, but
you
I
are.
wonder if I'm actually,
No,
as
you
opposed to my
Oh, I see. Maybe
AirPods.
it's going in between every
It's
once
not
in a while.
supposed to. I thought I had set it up. I'm
Yeah, it was great
curious.
for a while, then it changed its mind. But
Yeah, let's
it's fine
see.
right now. It's
Speaker
totally
mic.
fine.
No, no, this says the microphone is my Yeti microphone. So
Nice.
anyway, yeah,
This was so cool.
it's
So
great.
cool. You are a very interesting writer, my friend. and I look forward to more of your posts and your articles and your books. And I'm so glad we're friends.
I am too. Thank you, Lauren. This
Thank you
has
so
been
much,
great.
Seth.
This is so
It-
much fun.
It's totally fun.
Um,
I mean, if you're going to think about all these things, where are you going to get a chance to talk about them?
right. Right.
Got to make our own talk show.
Yeah, right, right, right.
Right.
Okay, well, this is great. Dog's crying. I think
Yes,
she
my dogs
deserves
are
to be
looking at me
let
like,
out.
"Gotta get out now," you know?
Yeah, yeah.
The 2 of them are looking at me.
Right. Right.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. It's been a great pleasure, and I'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon.
All right, take
Ciao.
care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.